Hello, and welcome back from lunch. Thank you so much for doing your ET phone home break and then coming back into the room. So this is known as the Analyst Lightning Round. So I'm Maribel Lopez. You saw me yesterday. Some of you saw me yesterday on the keynote. And today we're going to talk to our advisory board panel about really cool trends and interesting things that they're seeing in their research. And I feel like I'm behind the podium. Everybody see me? Actually, I know what I'm going to do. No, wait. Hold on. We have the technology. We'll just go here.
All right.
There we go. Okay. Take two, Analyst Lightning Round. So since I'm on this side now, maybe I will start with Eric, but I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves, their research company, and then just give a minute about what you're working on these days.
Great.
Eric.
Thanks, Maribel. So Eric Klein, I'm a research director at VDC Research. We're a high technology market research firm. Broadly covering mobility as a firm. My specific kind of core areas of coverage are around enterprise mobility management, security, and application development. Right now, a lot of my focus has been on unified endpoint management.
Great. Stephanie?
Test. Okay, good. My name's Stephanie Atkinson. I'm the CEO of Compass Intelligence. We primarily focus on mobile and Internet of Things, more focused on B2B, so the enterprise side of the house, looking at use cases, how businesses consume, manage, secure, implement technology in the workplace.
Bob?
Hi, I'm Bob Egan, founder of Sepharim Group, and I spend every waking moment thinking about the problems that CIOs have in building better solutions for their enterprise. And primarily these days, that really is about mobility, Internet of Things, the whole cloud connectivity and security within, I guess, the platform, because it's kind of like everywhere.
Excellent. Okay, so we've had some discussion in the breakouts. We've had some discussion yesterday with Kevin Kiley on stage. Eric, tell me a little bit about what you see as new and different and interesting from a research perspective, your findings in unified endpoint management. What should we be thinking about today?
Windows 10 migration is really what it's all about. How quickly are our businesses going to move and actually meaningfully roll out Windows 10?
Anybody roll out Windows 10 yet?
Wow.
Okay, so we've got...
That's
I'd
actually
say
really, really good.
almost 50% of the room. That's fabulous. Great.
Yeah, so I think that's the key here. I mean, obviously, I think most of us here know Microsoft's doing some pretty interesting things with their universal platform, or universal Windows platform. I mean, that's really, I think, what I'm interested in is how these OS platforms are evolving, how they're becoming more mobile-like in terms of the way they're managed. We heard a lot of that last night with Jack Madden's interview with Kevin Kiley. That's actually a really important element of why I think corporations, that's going to prompt organizations to make their move. There's a cost savings opportunity. There's an administrative overhead opportunity to reduce that administrative overhead of those legacy Windows deployments that are very disparate and aging. So
Do you see IoT fitting into this at all? I know a lot of the companies that we talk to have started talking about unified endpoint management, not just as mobile and PC, but also as IoT. Do we think that's going to fly?
I think it flies first with what I call headless devices. There's already been some action there. VMware, in fact, has moved in that direction through some partnerships. That's an important area because there's a lot of printers out there that should be managed. There's a lot of peripheral management opportunities out there. So that's really, I think, the first low-hanging fruit opportunity. But IoT certainly, without question, eventually, I think, we heard a lot of talk about the costs coming down and how we're going to do that $100,000 car, the $60,000 car, the $30,000 car. Same concept is going to apply in the enterprise in terms of costs coming down and managing those devices.
Since we're talking about IoT, Bob, I know you've been doing a lot of work with CIOs and IT leaders on the move to IoT, and I know we had some discussions earlier today with Intel about IoT and business value. From some of the customers you've been talking to, do you have any examples of how IoT is changing their processes or workflow that you can share with the audience?
Yeah, I think the general thesis is, on a practical basis, what can people do with IoT, not just to bring agility into their organizations, but to reduce the cost of serve, right? And some of the models they think about are companies like Apple, for example. To generate $10 million of revenue, it only requires 5 employees at Apple. If you look at other software companies like an SAP or an Oracle.
I'm doing something wrong, apparently.
To generate $10 million at a traditional software company like SAP or Oracle, it takes more like 36 employees. If you look at hospitals, if you look at the travel industry, it takes in and around 250 employees in terms of cost to serve. And so you wonder, in the case of transportation, why a company like Airbnb is so successful, right? And so when CIOs are taking a look, especially in healthcare, and I'll share one of those examples, it's really how to bring not just big data, but more intelligent data while reducing the cost of serve and increasing the goodness of the product that they deliver. So one hospital, how many of you been in a hospital in the last year or two? Not too many people, fortunately, right? But one of the transformations that's taken place is bedside is things like oxygen levels and EKG machines have all become wireless, right? And so hospitals have gotten very good at measuring sort of the function of the body, whether it's post-op or pre-op or some form of rehab and recovery, right? But the minute they start getting people up out of bed, which is really a big thing now in hospitals, that connectivity kind of goes away. One of the things they want to monitor is the cadence of an individual, how far they walk, how often they walk, and so on and so forth. And it used to be that, in fact, it's still very common that they count what they call rabbits on the wall, right? So they mark off every 10 feet a rabbit, and a nurse practitioner or someone else in the hospital will say, Mr. Egan walked 5 feet today, and he walked 10 feet, the next day, and so on and so forth. But it's completely disconnected of a lot of the services relative to what did the EKG look like, right? What do the oxygenation levels look like, and so on and so forth. And so now hospitals are taking a look at actually adding things that automatically look at the cadence of the individual, the duration, the time, and so on and so forth. Match that against things like their EKG and their oxygenation, and then within big data and artificial intelligence, be able to say, it's this doctor prescribing these kinds of routines and these kinds of medicines, had this kind of surgery, and now matching it up to the physical things that are going on with the patient and automating that in a way that reduces the friction of care, therefore reduces the cost of serve, and provides betterness to the client. So that's one of many, I think, fascinating examples that are taking place.
Any other examples on the panel? I know I've been talking to a lot of companies about cold supply chain recently. So one of the things that we've talked about a lot is the concept of monitoring temperature and flow of goods, and now we're starting to see organizations integrate that into their supply chain apps now at this point. So I think when I look at what's going on in the research field, one of the things that we're trying to figure out is how do people reinvent their business processes and their apps based on the fact that they have new data. So just having the new data, what Brian was talking about earlier with connecting the data isn't enough. We have to figure out how to get it back into our applications. And that then becomes a question of, is it a new app or an existing app that's been modified, and how do you work with your ERP supply chain vendors to make this happen? So that's one of the things that we've seen as a big challenge for IT leaders. Stephanie, I know that you've been also looking at some of the IoT landscape, and I know that you've also started to look at robotics. What do you see going on as interesting trends in the space?
It's interesting because I think we've been hearing a lot of the key terms this week: AI, cognitive computing, machine learning, and all of these things that I guess last year were really big topics for the event as well. Now we're really starting to hear more and more about how robotics is going to change industry, disrupt industry. Along with that is AI, right? You're leveraging robotics in manufacturing, in the customer experience, in the delivery of care or services. And it's going to hit every single industry. But again, the big challenge, I guess, for businesses today is trying to understand where that's going to impact my industry, right? And then number two, displacement, replacement, right, of our staff or labor. It's going to change the way we look at our labor force, who we're really looking to hire, that also means we as an industry, the technologists as well as those in the enterprise, need to think about re-educating ourselves, right? We may have been trained or got our degree in one particular area, but now things are changing. So that also means that our workforce have to adapt as well. We'll see a great bit of educational institutions focus on robotics and artificial intelligence as majors, right? Going and doing the studies, so that way when we start to hire our workforce, our younger millennials and younger are going to be well adept to do that, because our existing workforce, we haven't been trained. We're not familiar with this. It seems very foreign, and it's very scary as an industry to think about. Me, I've been doing this for 20 years, and you're saying that a robot's going to replace, assembly line assembly, and I've been doing this my entire career, right? Those kinds of things are what we're starting to hear a lot more about from the enterprise. And then how do we connect that back to the network of our sensor networks and all the other things that are collecting and analyzing the data?
So we do a benchmark at Lopez Research every year, and so we're getting in the initial results from the benchmark. Not surprisingly, security was the top IT concern for this year. That doesn't ever seem to change. What has changed that I thought was interesting is that now understanding what AI and machine learning has come up is the number 3 priority for IT leaders, which I think is a big move from last year, which it wasn't even really on the radar. And I think this has a lot to do with the fact that every time we talk to somebody, machine learning and AI is in there as a concept. And most of us, it's taken me a while of talking to people to try to figure out what that means to them. And what I've discovered is, even from the largest vendors, is this is a really nascent field. So if you're feeling a bit uncomfortable and you don't actually think you have a full handle on it, don't worry about it. Turns out the experts are still in the same spot. So, but it's moving rapidly, and that's exciting. And one of the things that we've seen is a lot of new cloud-based services. These cloud-based services have been based around natural language processing, sentiment analysis, vision. So not everything that you would look for, but if any of those happen to be interesting use cases for you. So as an example, in the vision, like what does one use a vision API for? Everybody thinks categorizing photos. Anybody familiar with Rent-A-Kill? Yeah, it's a great, actually, in my last company, we used to have Rent-A-Kill watering our plants, and I just thought it was a truly unfortunate name. But at any rate, one of the things they do is pest control, and they're now using vision APIs to be able to understand what different pests are in different environments. And it's actually accelerated their process for figuring out treatments tremendously within their organization, and really been a good use case of how a simple machine learning API can be very powerful in the right context.
I have another really interesting example. One of my clients we had a number of sessions and we talked about this. Is right now when you buy a smartphone, you have, in some cases with your carrier, a 30-day window to get that device insured, right? And every once in a while they might open it up a little longer, right? There's specials. But how are they using AI in the smartphone world? We all know that it's an undertaking if you lose your device. You want that device replaced immediately. You can't get work done. We use our devices for personal and business reasons. We can't live without. So using AI, there is a company out there, and forgive me because I don't have the name of that, but I will find that out if you are interested. The technology will allow the phone to take a picture of itself and tell the insurance carrier if that device is cracked, scratched, and then also have other ways of checking the internal components of that device, so they know, maybe it's 6 months from down the road or 3 months down the road, and you have pre-owned devices that you're, leveraging or farming out to your workforce, but you want to insure those devices and you haven't insured those devices. So you're now, in the future, you will be able to go to a regular insurance carrier that you use today for your home and automotive and others, and they will be selling smartphone insurance. So the secondary insurance market is all going to come about just with the use of AI, having that device being able to take a picture of itself. And that's just one little minor, you think about how powerful that creates a whole new market and a whole new revenue stream for companies that before were not covering insurance for smartphones in corporate America, and even personal use.
That's interesting.
Now, everybody here takes client inquiries. So if you had to look back over the past 2 months, what have been the most calls that you've received? And what's been the topic for the most calls that you've received over the past couple of months?
Well, for me, by far and away, it's about how to get higher efficiencies in the organizations and business agility. And that seems to be a center point where CIOs who have long argued with chief marketing officers and other business dealers who have stolen a lot of their budgets in many cases have all found the point that they can actually agree on, right? And people are really trying to find what is that win-win scenario. Now, quite often, that discussion also centers on mobility, right? But it's no longer the mobile phone, right? To Maribel, something you've been preaching a long time, it's really about the relevant right-time experience, right? And one of the things that they wrestle with is that a lot of organizations looked at net new applications and they made the move to cloud, and they realized that a lot of the stuff that's on-prem, they can't just switch off overnight because disaster will strike. And so you have different parts of the organization wanting to move at different levels of pace. And we have some vendors in the mobile space and the IoT sort of building up a land grab from the bottom. And then you have the enterprise and the business units that have operations that are sort of built out, from the top down. And then right smack in the middle is all these people who are charged with actually operating the business. And people are really trying to figure out how to make those two ends meet in a way that's good for the business and good for the customer.
Perfect. So around organizational change and roles. Stephanie?
Yeah, I think for us, we definitely work very closely with a lot of the technology companies, and they are trying to better understand the enterprise. And so we find that there's a gap in the industry out there. Those that are in your own industry, you know who all your major suppliers are, you know all the big brands, you know what's kind of keeps your industry ticking. The technologists understand the technology side of it. There's this gap in the middle where we all want to better understand the enterprise. And at this point in time, most of my customers want help with understanding key verticals, but diving into those industries in more in depth than they have ever before. And this is all due to IoT, because as you look at IoT, it's definitely more application focused. And you need to understand the IoT, not only the IoT ecosystem, but the industry ecosystem. And so we kind of go through processes where we dive into a core industry, looking at stakeholders, processes, operations. I think they mentioned operations this morning, or processes. But if you don't understand how the flow of information and services and products are within that industry, and maybe it's specific to the company, but there's horizontal and also vertical similarities, then you really can't speak to the customer. And so right now, I think the big area of focus has been around market segmentation, looking at core verticals, and then secondarily to that, it all is focused on the customer experience. So we're leading with the customer now, which is really refreshing, because in our world, you hear technology every single day, but we have to lead with the customer when it comes to IoT, and so that's a big shift, I think, that I'm seeing.
Eric?
Yeah.
Round it out.
Sure. Yeah, I would concur with most of what these guys said. I mean, the inquiries are pretty much all over the board, but a lot of questions on partnership strategies. A lot of the big vendors we speak with are, trying to have a holistic platform that does everything. And I think we talked a lot about that already, or it came up at certain points. So, kind of guiding them towards best-of-breed partners and helping, doing a lot of matchmaking. But a lot of the inquiries do center around segmentation, vertical industry intelligence, trying to better understand how to attack specific vertical markets with data and sharing data with them.
I get a lot of inquiries now about what do all these terms mean between AI, deep learning, machine learning, neural networks. I get a lot of, people are trying to sell me IoT, what should be included in these solutions, and are there any good partners, combinations of partners coming together. So
It's interesting you bring that up because a lot of people ask, you know, where is AI going and what is its capabilities?
yeah,
And if anybody in the audience filled up a 1-gallon bucket with water in it, and you grabbed it by the handle and started to run, what do you think would happen?
you spill it.
Probably spill it, right? I would urge you to ask that question in Google and see what the answer looks like.
Okay then.
And that's fundamentally the problem with AI. There's some things that you can process with your brain that AI is still, from an intelligence standpoint, still stumbles. I'm not going to give you the answer, but you'll get a kick out of the answer if you go and Google it.
Excellent. All right, so with that, we're going to round out the Analyst Lightning Round. Thank you for
you.
your time and attention. Quick round of applause for that.